Well, let's get some analysis now with East Africa Affairs analyst Joseph Ochieno, who joins us now from Kampala in Uganda. Really good to have you with us, Joseph. And it's completely understandable, isn't it, that foreign missions are all evacuating their citizens, including Turkey. But what does that mean for the local Sudanese? A lot of them don't have that option to even flee Khartoum. What is it like there for the Sudanese people who are caught up in the crossfire here?
It is understandable that major powers and established embassies are being evacuated and the major powers are evacuating their citizens. But the message actually to the local Sudanese and to those of us who are observers and those who are neighbors is extraordinarily scary. It's generally quite unusual that at the peak of a crisis like this, focus would be on big powers pushing for their citizens out. I was talking to a senior journalist within the region this morning, and part of the conversation is that it appears that major powers know something happening. They know some of the background, and maybe some of them know certain things which are pending that most of us don't know. In which case, then your question is, if then foreign powers are evacuating, what really is the reality for ordinary Sudanese people remaining down there? It is extremely scary for people, particularly in Khartoum. I think this thing has come up as a big shock, including to people like myself who normally follow these things quite closely. I didn't expect that it would reach a stage like this a week on, and foreign nationals are being evacuated, and we're saying that Khartoum may almost certainly become a possible Mogadishu of a new Arab nature. So it's very, very scary. More so because thus far, several ceasefires have been attempted and several ceasefires have been broken. And in all cases, you don't know who's who. And to consider that you don't see any major political players within the Sudan except two fully armed and equipped military guys with extremely crude records is very scary.
Joseph, tell us who might be able to broker some sort of a truce here. We know there are many regional powers at play in Sudan, from Egypt to the UAE, Saudi Arabia. The US and EU are calling for peace. But realistically, which regional power really does have the influence to bring the two sides together and at least stop the fighting?
I can tell you that at the moment it's one of those rare occasions when I would tell you that I don't know. I don't know because, as it were, the East African communities who are actually neighbors, the big guy is Mr. Museveni, neither here nor there. Are there self-interest? The record in terms of historical relation between Uganda and Uganda and South Sudan, stroke Sudan, has not been particularly good. Number two, if you consider Egypt as the big power, Egypt seems to be actually an interested party. Maybe you would talk about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is an interested party. Beyond that, then you think of the big powers. There are indications, of course, that's been suggested. The Gallo man, the Hemeti guy, the Janjaweed guy of Darfur, now a big, powerful guy. Is there a possibility that perhaps he might have a backing of main Western players in this? In which case, then, if it is the case, that means that this thing is also entrenched militarily, that the political solution does not seem to appear very apparent. Now, that is actually not only scary, but it tells you that the apparent conversations about Russian bases recently, the usual geopolitics, the location of Sudan, tells you that actually this is something for which we don't know the underlying causes as of today. Some of the suspicions and innuendos are things which are not yet for your television networks at the moment.
And what about the humanitarian needs of the Sudanese who are caught up in this fighting? It sounds like a truce between the two sides seems unlikely at this point, but what about a humanitarian corridor which the UN has called for? Do you believe that's likely in the shorter term?
Attempts have been made and had been made for possibilities for humanitarian corridor. Some of these actually, were hit back with claims and counterclaims of both sides targeting civilians. I think some of the foreign diplomats, including those who were being interviewed on your clip, have suggested that actually some of them have been targeted. So the scare is that humanitarian agencies, both local and international, are as much under threat as are the local healthcare workers. the doctors' union being the most powerful, and the guys who nearly toppled el-Bashir, have been calling for truce, have been calling for humanitarian assistance at the beginning of the conflict. I think they were trying to say that both sides were targeting civilian and civilian locations, but people thought that perhaps for them they're playing with politics. It is shocking that this situation could escalate to reach a stage in which, at the moment, you're asking me that question, and I cannot clearly give you an established answer. And as I said, with the evacuations being the focus today, it is telling us that, well, unfortunately, Khartoum and perhaps Omdurman are preparing for a bloodbath.
Okay, Joseph Ochieno, we will have to leave it there. But really good to get your analysis as always. Thanks again for joining us.